Detective Comics issue 1066 by Ram V. So moving into first things first, and that is in relation to the covers. So do these covers in any way, shape or form connect to something that is happening inside with the story? Sure enough, they do. First one, where the other one is like a 90s rewind comic cover. And for the first cover, I give an 8 out of 10. But for the rewind, as I really like it, an 8.5 out of 10. I just want to point out that I will not be covering the backstory in this, but only the main story. So we'll move into first things first, and that is looking into the internal art around the beginning, middle, and of course the end. And I'll use the variant to show that. So as we start to jump into the beginning, we've got a bit of a situation here to which we've got Gordon and Bullock working together, and of course the Orkham family with Prince Arzen. So now moving towards the middle of the story, and we start to see the character of Two-Face and his role in the story. And last but not least, starting to move towards the end, to which we get an appearance of a bit of a werewolf character going up against Mr. Freeze. So I'll leave it there. So for the internal art, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Now, the next thing is the story rating. With the story rating, I like to center it on 4 specific areas. First things first is comic references. So did we actually get any comic references in relation to this story? We did in relation to the Fear State arc, which I remember was under Tinian. The next area was in the area of time, to which we had addressed as now. The locations that showed up in the story were Gotham City, of course, Bullock and Gordon's office, which was really interesting, and of course, I believe it was the Power Station, I believe it was. The cast of characters consisting of Gordon and Bullock. We also had Arzen, we had Batman, we also had Two-Face, and a couple of other characters. Manacano actually made a reappearance, and also Mr. Freeze. So for the overall story rating in this, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. This story is actually starting to drop. And if this is meant to be the first act, it's actually slipped. So whether it will make it up in the next part of the beginning of the next act, I don't know. We'll see what happens. So until then, let's keep it colorful and have yourself an awesome day. Ram V Detective Comics, Batman Detective Comics Annual. And as you can see here, we've got quite an interesting cover. And does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to something that's happening inside with the story? Sure enough, it does, to which I give a 7 out of 10. I'll now go to showing some of the internal art around the beginning, middle and end, happening story-wise. As things begin, in regards to this story, we have the Orkhams, and we get a bit of a talk about the past in Gotham City, and to what Gotham used to be called. do get a bit of a flashback of sorts, and we get to see some characters sort of like connected to the past here. I'll move to another part of the book. One thing that you do sort of see in this is sort of like a repeat in its own way of, say, a Batman of the past to a somewhat Poison Ivy of the past, and I think that's not really clever, considering these people should actually be in the present time of Batman. I understand where he's sort of like trying to come off with this, but I really think Ram V could have actually brought in some originality in here, such as he could have brought in maybe an older character connected to the DC universe, maybe even showing how they connect to this past and how they might have played a part in shaping Gotham past and maybe even parts of maybe even Gotham future. And I think that would have been very much better executed in this story, because I understand what they're trying to do, and it's like playing the Court of the Owls approach again, and it's not really needed. So for the internal art, I will give it this. I did actually enjoy the internal art, to which I gave a 7.5 out of 10. Moving into the story, now first things first, in relation to this particular annual, there were no comic references to any of the previous issues on the Ram V run or any of the other runs or the Chip Zdarsky run, which wouldn't have gone astray anyway. This is the area of time to which we had now, which addressed the present. We also had later towards the end, and also the year of 1776. The location, we had Gotham City. We also had some other names connected to sort of like old Gotham and that. And you'll get to see that when you're reading the story. When we move into the cast of characters, we had Shavod and Gale connected to the Orgums. So for the overall story rating in this, I must admit, I like the idea of what Ram V did, but I think the execution of this story idea is somewhat a little bit stupid. I understand that there's sort of like bringing in a member connected to the Wayne family, dressed as like a Batman type character. But what if that was actually addressed more differently? Instead of having a Batman type character in the past, maybe another character? Or it could have been a good opportunity to actually create a new character, to which might make an appearance in, say, one of the upcoming acts in relation to this story. And I think that would have made a little bit more sense, even if the character is immortal or something like that, or their soul is maybe bound to magic, for example, and without without knowing sort of like the cure to this certain magic of sorts, or the counter curse or the counter to that magic, they're unable to die, and they're like maybe even trying to search for the answer so that they can eventually have a peaceful sleep and pass away. Just as an example, I never really got any of this in in this story. It's just mainly doing idea of the deed in the story and how it's connected to the Arkham Asylum and all that. So for the overall story rating, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. You've done some great work, Ram V, with things, but I think this time you really need to start exploring new doors and new ideas. Instead of regurgitating old ones. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day. I'll be covering Detective Comics issue 1067 and moving into first things first, and that is in relation to the covers. Do these covers in any way, shape, or form connect to something that's happening inside with the story? Even though the variant doesn't, the main one does, but that's neither here or there. So for the overall cover rating for the first cover, which is the main cover, a 7.5 out of 10, and for the second cover, a 7 out of 10. I will not be covering the backstory in this. So let's get to it as we start to look into the internal art. So as the story begins, we've got underneath Gotham City as to some of the things that are happening. And whilst things are occurring, Batman also gets some unexpected help from Mr. Freeze. Whilst things are happening up on the surface, we get quite a bit happening with the Orgum family, including Arzen. The story continues, and we have Batman now basically in Mr. Freeze's own cave of sorts, or say sanctuary. The story continues, and we see some things happening on the surface. I do admit, I do quite like that mask for the Orgums. And last but not least, towards the end of the story, to which Batman returns into Gotham City. So for the internal art, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move into the story rating. So first things first, I like to cover in about 4 sections. Sometimes it's free, depending if it's like a new series. It's basically given free until they start to put in the comic references, unless they put the comic references in early. So for the first comic reference, we got the Detective Comics Annual of 2022. The time for the area of time we had now. So to address the present, we had quite a number of locations, which is the next thing. Gotham City, Arkham, the Narrows. We also had the Wayne Realty office and something else. Last but not least, the cast of characters consisting of Batman, Mr. Freeze, Arzen, Gael, which is sort of like a bit of an old English take on the word jail. And also, I think it's Shahad. So for the overall story rating, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day. A DC comic, a Detective Comic review, and in this Detective Comics issue 1068 by Ram V, with work by Albuquerque, And of course, we've got Reyes, Mickey, and Stuart. I will not be covering the backstory in this, but I will be covering the main story. So first things first, does this cover in a shape or form connect to something that's happening inside of the story? In some essence it does, but overall I give it a 6.5 out of 10. So moving into the next part, and that is looking at the internal art around the beginning, middle, and end in relation to what's happening with the story and the characters. And as the story begins, we get to see that there's something happening in Gotham. We don't really get any indication as to where a lot of this is taking place in Gotham, which is really disappointing, as if it had included it in the story, it would have actually made the story rating a little bit higher in what I'll be giving it towards the end. Now, just moving a little bit more in relation to the story, and we have Batman encountering one whose surname is Silver, who's turned into a werewolf. We end up meeting this new character. I'm not too sure who exactly they are. The cast of characters in this could have been way better. And it really doesn't work for what's happening in the story. So already this story is slipping. We, of course, get some more happening on the scene. And, of course, I'll go all the way towards the end of the story here. Moving into one of the events. I think that's meant to be Renee Montoya, but it's not acknowledged that it is. Of course, we get to see Jim Gordon in this. And last but not least, towards the end, which we also see Two-Face going out of his way also to help Batman and whoever some of these new people are. So, for the internal art, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move in relation to the story. So, first things first, did we get any comic references? That's one of the first things I like to look for in relation to this story, and considering how long Batman's been going for, even under RMV, no, we didn't. Did we get any indication of time, or like when this is taking place time-wise? No, we didn't. Very disappointing. Of course, we know the location's taking place in Gotham, but it also would have been nice to see some other areas mentioned of where events were happening in Gotham. And in that, it's really starting to lose a lot of points with me. If you happen to enjoy the series, let me know what you're enjoying about the series. Now, moving on to the last but not least, and that is the cast of characters. We, of course, had Two-Face, who's also Harvey Dent. We had Batman, we had Jim Gordon, and the other character that I could sort of make out was, in Batman's interaction, was Silver. I'm not too sure if that was Renee Montoya at the end of the story or not. It wasn't really acknowledged that way. Though it would not hurt to see the character acknowledged by name. So for the overall story rating in this, I give a 6.5 out of 10. Until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.